Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. Today I want to talk about my experience with the Battlefield 5 Beta and share the good, the bad and the ugly aspects of that build that we were able to play. Now, first of all, as someone who has been a fan of the Battlefield franchise since the release of the Battlefield 1942 demo back in 2002, I did not like the route that the franchise took starting with Battlefield 3, where EA and DICE tried very hard to make it appeal to a larger, more casual-oriented player base. In Battlefield 1 we then saw what these changes to the core game design and how the marketing presented Battlefield games starting with Battlefield 3 ultimately led to. An online experience that completely deteriorated to a mindless mess, with next to no teamwork on public servers nor any sort of tactical play. Like many others, I stopped to play Battlefield 1 after less than 20 hours simply because I got bored of that online experience, which really had nothing in common with what attracted me to the Battlefield franchise in the first place. So after Battlefield 1 I was honestly done with the Battlefield franchise, as I could not imagine that DICE and EA would even dare to change the core gameplay experience again and potentially piss off all those players who like the Rambo experience, where they are super effective on their own and teamwork is entirely optional. But DICE did not only notice the decline of the teamwork on public servers, they were not happy about that either, which is why they set out to change things with Battlefield 5. Now, I'm sure we all agree that the marketing for Battlefield 5 has been a disaster from the very first minute, simply because it did not manage to explain what this game is actually about. All it did was create a ton of internet drama. Only recently EA has started to release trailers which properly explain what playing the game will be like, and what changes DICE made to the core game design and why. DICE is also more open about what they do and why they are doing it, which I think is great, because we've been asking for this level of transparency and communication for many years now. So all the drama and bad marketing aside, DICE and EA made the very bold decision to ditch many of the mechanics that ultimately caused the franchise to deteriorate into the mess that we've seen with Battlefield 1. And instead create a gameplay experience that brings back what the franchise was once known for. And I can tell you firsthand that based on my experience in the alpha and the beta, they are on a very good path to accomplish that goal. And I can see myself playing this game a lot, because Battlefield 5 has great potential to provide me with the Battlefield experience I love, instead of the Battlefield experience that bores me to death. So while I really like what DICE is aiming for here, the beta exposed that the game still has many issues, which simply add up and make me worry about how long it will take to get Battlefield 5 into a state where I consider it to be a complete and polished product that you can pick up and just have fun with. Like, what's up with the netcode and the servers? They do run at a tick rate of 60 Hz, but even at a ping of less than 25 milliseconds and a frame rate of 120, I've noticed on my first and last shots that the hit marker seems to have quite a long delay, even when you shoot at someone who is less than 50 meters away. I also receive damage behind solid cover quite frequently, even when the other player also had a ping of less than 25 milliseconds. And if you try to snipe players from far away, then you will have noticed a lot of rubber banding, which makes them hard to hit. So there is something going on here that the developers must look into, because these delays feel really bad. Sadly, I was not able to do netcode tests during the alpha nor the beta, because my test players always got killed before I could do a single test. So to do my usual netcode tests, I will have to wait until I can get my hands on a private server, or a server that doesn't fill up within less than a minute. Then let's talk about the revive mechanic. It is still suffering from obvious bugs, like that it can take up to 10 seconds before the medics see the revive icon above a player who is bleeding out, or that a revive just won't happen no matter how hard you press the E key on your keyboard. What I really do not understand is why DICE caved and added the ability to skip the revive. This really has no place in a game like Battlefield 5, especially when you consider that your team loses a ticket when you respawn. So, in order to win, you want that players get revived as much as possible, which means that you must give your squad mates and medics a chance to actually do a revive. That said, in situations where there is no medic or squad mate within 50 meters, it makes no sense to even have the player enter the bleeding out state, as there is no chance that he will get revived. In such a case, the player should always go straight back to the deploy menu, where he has to wait for the deploy timer to reach 0. It is also unfortunate that we still don't get detailed damage information about the damage we received. I once did a concept design for a kill screen that shows damage stats which explain how you got killed. Such would help a lot in Battlefield 5 as I had many cases where it wasn't clear what just happened, and it surely doesn't help that the damage indicator sometimes seems to point in the wrong direction. It would also be nice if I could see the ping of the player who killed me, especially in situations where I felt that I got shot behind cover. The comros got a pretty nice redesign in the beta, but I would really like to see how far away the objectives are, because then I could easily choose the closest objective without having to look at the map first to find out which one is the closest. Related to that is that the text feed, or the messages triggered by the actions inside the comros, are still hidden inside the chat, which most people, including myself, have set to hide, because it is primarily used by players to complain and insult each other. What I would like is to propose that the game either shows the text feed below the chat window, or that they will appear inside the chat window even when it's set to hide, so that it only hides the nonsense that other players use the chat for. In the beta, DICE also added a small compass ribbon above the minimap, and while we could take use of that in some situations during the beta, it ultimately turned out to be so small that it is hard to use in many cases. A big compass ribbon on top of the screen would work much better, so I hope that at least the Battle Royale mode will have a big compass ribbon. The ping markers that you can set with the Q key are still not very useful, because they disappear into the background like many other elements on the HUD, which is why most of the time your squad mates have a hard time to just find the marker you set. DICE must work on these visibility issues, because this is a very powerful feature for teamwork. Battlefield 5 has many game mechanics that emphasize teamwork, and especially playing as a squad. I think that DICE should also have the scoreboard show how important squads are in this game, which is why I made a quick design concept where the scoreboard groups players by squad, which should help to incentivize players to stick with their squad. At the end of the round, you can still show individual players who made the most kills or had the longest kill streak, so that outstanding achievements of individual players are still valued. Since the beta, any player can also go to a refill station or to one of the crates dropped by a medic to pick up a medkit that they can use to heal themselves. So, since Battlefield 5 offers players with quite many ways to get healed, I think that even the limited auto heal has to go away now once and for all. A feature that is still underrated by many players is the fortification system, which is really sad because it is a very powerful tool to block enemies from getting to the objective, or to build cover when you try to take or defend the objective. Back in Battlefield 2 you had the voice of the commander give you hints about various aspects of the game, like when you walked past a UAV trailer.
The UAV trailer nearby belongs to your team. If this is destroyed, your commander will not be able to give you UAV support.
Considering how complex Battlefield games are, I think that Battlefield 5 also needs such a system, which tells the player that he can, in example, build fortifications at his current location and explain what these are good for. Here I think it is much more effective to use a voiceover instead of just a text box on the HUD, because players simply don't have the time to read what these say. These hints should then only play a couple of times until they get disabled, because otherwise they would get really annoying. There should also be options to reset the hint system and to disable it entirely. I would also like to get an option to disable the tension music that starts to play towards the end of a match, because I find that music very annoying, especially since it starts too early. And I would also lower the amount of tickets that the match starts with, because I feel that matches drag on for a little too long at the moment. I did not spend much time in planes during the beta, but generally speaking they feel really weak, and as an infantry player you barely notice that they are there. I talked about this in my alpha feedback video already. DICE finally needs to do something to have pilots participate in the battle that is going on the ground, and have them work with their team. A close air support game mechanic like I once did a concept design for would be one way to help strengthen the relationship between ground and air units. Tanks also didn't feel too good in the beta, which is why I didn't use them much. I like some aspects of their design, but overall they are just too slow and too clunky to be even remotely effective. One thing that DICE must really add is the ability for the gunner to duck and take cover, like we could do in Battlefield 2, because otherwise the gunner position is a death trap that no one will use. I also wonder if DICE has to consider class limits, because at some points it felt like most of my and the enemy's team were playing as sniper. I know that many players were just testing different things during the beta, so we have to see how this develops after the release. But if the telemetry shows that too many players choose a specific class, then DICE has to think about measures to counter that. The customization and unlock systems were a quite hot topic in the beta, especially because you had to leave the match and then do changes inside the main menu. Luckily, this will not be the case in the final version of the game. However, I really do not like the customization menu, as way too many clicks are required to go through the menus and submenus. What I want to see here is a nice gun bench, where I not only see all the details of my gun, but where I can also change all parts very quickly and define a custom name for that setup. I also have to say that I dislike those huge tiles and the menu structure with all the submenus, since that design was introduced in Battlefield 1. I mean, it looks nice, like something a designer would build to show what he can do, but it's just not practical to use. I know that designers will hate me for saying this, but usability is more important than what something looks like. Because when something is just a pain to use, then players will stop using it or not use it as much, no matter how nice it looks. By now you have surely also heard that all gun customization elements are just cosmetics and don't affect how the gun handles. To change the characteristics of a gun, you need to use the in-game currency that you earn by playing the game and then choose an upgrade path. I'm still not sure what to think about this. On one hand, I don't mind that system, as it doesn't seem like these upgrades made much of a difference in the beta anyway. On the other hand, I would really enjoy a decent gun bench where I can build and tweak my gun, where all attachments and modifications affect how the gun handles, and where I see the change instantly inside the same screen, instead of having to go to yet another menu to upgrade and change the characteristics of my gun. It would also be great if the options menu would finally get a decent preview where you see what a setting does. The entire options menu also desperately needs some proper restructuring because it just overwhelms the player. Battlefield 5 has a very nice feature where you can create a squad inside the main menu and then join a server with your friends. Sadly, it was still utterly broken during the beta. If that feature does not work perfectly at launch, then I would honestly consider the game to be unplayable. DICE must get this done right from day one, or many players will rightfully be upset if this feature doesn't work. So, as I said, Battlefield 5 was off to a rough start, mainly because of how bad its marketing was. And DICE will continue to face a lot of criticism from players who don't like the radical changes done to restore teamwork and tactical play on public servers. But based on the state that the beta was in, and the reports that some parts of the game will not be available at release, I fear that DICE tries to add too much to this game, which is why I don't expect that the launch will be smooth, even after it got pushed back to November. However, when it comes to the game design, then I hope that players will ignore all the drama caused by the marketing and give Battlefield 5 a fair chance. Because this is the closest that a Frostbite engine Battlefield game has come yet to deliver the original, teamwork and skill-based Battlefield experience where your skill matters as the game does not hold your hand. And that's all for today. If you like the work that I do on my channel, then it would be great if you could support me on Patreon. Without the awesome support that I get from my patrons, Battle Nonsense could simply not exist anymore. You can find a link to my Patreon in the description down below, where you will also find links to my social accounts in case that you want to stay up to date on the videos that I'm working on. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris, and this was Battle Nonsense.